Welcome to PoliticKING. I'm Larry King. On Monday, the Trump administration announced a controversial change to the next official count of people living in the United States. That is, their intent to start asking participants in the census about citizenship status. The last time the question was asked of everyone was in 1950. Critics immediately labeled this action as anti-immigrant, while the administration says the change is critical to the enforcement of the Voting Rights Act and an important tool in protecting against racial discrimination during elections. Let's begin with our political panel. Joining me from Washington, D.C. is Chris Wilson, Director of Research and Digital Strategy for Ted Cruz's campaign in 2016, and he is CEO of WPA Intelligence. And in New York, Nate Lerner, Grassroots Director at the Build the Wave organization, Executive Director at the Democratic Coalition, and creator of the app #BoycottTrump. All right, Chris, we'll start with you. What's your reaction to the administration, including this citizenship question? I thought the census was about how many people are living in America.
Well, it's sort of a common sense change, and as you read initially, I think it's also one that's important about protecting minority rights. I mean, the fact is the Voting Rights Act requires a counting of citizens, and so if you have either legal immigrants who can't vote or illegal immigrants who also obviously can't vote, then what that does is it undervalues all citizens, and those are citizens. I mean, when it gets down to it, this doesn't really affect states like Oklahoma or Iowa or places like that. Where it's affecting is the minority districts outside of Houston, Texas, for example, or outside of Los Angeles. And so from that standpoint, if you have an underrepresentation of citizens or an overrepresentation because of counting adults that actually cannot vote, then what you're doing is you're undervaluing those voters and providing a situation that does not provide the protection necessary for people the Voting Rights Act is meant to protect. And the other aspect of this is for the party of the so-called party of science to be against actually counting people in the right way. It's a little bit surprising, I think somewhat disappointing. I mean, this is important for several different scientific endeavors, be it economics, be it social sciences, be it political science. It is important that we count people and able to allocate them in the right manner. And I think those are all important common sense changes.
Nate, what's your reaction?
Well, I think all you need to know about this is what you said. This hasn't been done since the 1950s, and there's a reason for that. It's very regressive. It doesn't make any sense, and it's a huge misstep by the government. What's going to happen is you're going to have folks in the Hispanic and Latino community who are now afraid to respond to this census, and they are therefore going to be underrepresented in the results that we see. And then that's almost like a form of gerrymandering, because then that's going to affect the way congressional districts are drawn. And it's really upsetting to see the government taking this overstep. And what's funny is for years under the Obama administration, Republicans had this bizarre conspiracy theory about the census, that it was going to be used for government oversight and overuse, and they almost refused to take it in many cases. Now we're seeing that in reality, and it's really unfortunate.
All right, Chris, 12 states are going to sue the administration over it, led by the New York State Attorney General. I'm asking in the original question, isn't the purpose of the census to find out how many people are living in America?
Well, it is, and it still will do that, and that's an important aspect, Larry. You're exactly right. But I think the assertion that somehow people would be afraid to now answer the census is at best speculative and at worst laughable. If someone is afraid they are going to be arrested or deported because they fill out the census and check a box, well, the fact is they wouldn't have filled out the census in the first place. If you're about to be arrested or you're afraid of being deported, you're probably not responding to government questionnaires as it is. I think the states that you see that are going to file suit here are the ones that know that they are counting people who are not voters, and they are then drawing congressional districts that are representing people based on adults who can't actually vote. And so you are going to see states like California and New York that have probably been overrepresented at the congressional level lose seats to those that are actually counting United States citizens. And I think one of the fundamental aspects of this that really you see a line drawn in the sand is, do you believe a congressional district should be apportioned and allocated based on United States citizens? If you believe that, then you're for this.
Nate, shouldn't we know who is a citizen and who is not?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like you said, the purpose of the census is to know how many people are in America, and there's a lot of reasons why we need to know that vary across the board. And I think you are going to see a lot of folks who are here legally who are now afraid, because it does feel like the government stepping into their homes is crossing the line, And it's not fair to assume that just because someone's here legally, they're going to therefore be comfortable answering the census. When you add this question, there's a lot that comes with it. There's a lot of tension right now between the government and immigrants, both those who are here legally and illegally. And I think you will lose a lot of legal immigrants, a lot of folks who were born in this country, simply because they don't want to risk being hassled by the government, being hassled by ICE agents. It's the climate we're seeing right now is very anti-immigrant, and it has a broader impact beyond just this census. And when you add this question to that, it then causes a lot of folks here legally to have that concern about it, and I think they will be underrepresented as a result. And I would never say that California or New York are overrepresented in government. If anything, they are underrepresented.
Chris Wilson and Nate Lerner are my guests. We'll have more with them after this. Okay, we'll move to some other areas. Chris, we'll start with you. It's now being reported that Trump is privately pushing for the U.S. military to fund part of the construction of the border wall. The electorate appears divided over this, as it is over so many things. Chris, what happened to Mexico?
That's a great question. Larry, as somebody who went up against Donald Trump 42 times in the primary, I joke with my friends who worked for the Clinton campaign. They only had to do it once. Working for Ted Cruz, we ran against him 42 separate times. So in my sleep, I hear the people chanting that Mexico's going to pay for the wall. So it is, that's clearly not what this would allocate at the time. Now, it's impossible to say what ultimately happens down the road and whether there are terrorist places that pay for it. But to look at this decision, the president actually clearly has broad authority to, in times of emergency or in times of national security, to reallocate funding. Now, the question is, where does this money come from? And there have been a lot of examples given of overspending in military situations. We can all think of, hammers that cost $72,000 and things like that. Whether or not how this is allocated, I think is still open to debate, and we don't know. That hasn't been stated. But the president does have the authority to do that. And I think if he were to go take this away from the new spending that's been created for new troops or taking care of veterans, that would be incredibly unpopular, and I think you would see people rise up and Congress would stop it. But if it is taking it away from areas in which there may be the ability to cut some waste and reallocate that to the wall, then that's probably something that he would have support on. So I think there's still a lot of questions to be answered on it, and it's certainly a creative approach and one that would accelerate the process of building the wall, which was a key part of his campaign promises.
Nate?
So this whole situation is very indicative of Trump's entire presidency. First of all, the budget's already been set. This would have to go back through Congress in order to happen. I guarantee Congress is not going to take away money from the military to pay for a border wall that we don't need. I wouldn't even say this is a time of emergency, because immigration from Mexico right now is net zero. We're losing as many people as we're gaining. And it's absolutely absurd that we'd be taking money from our troops, money from veterans, money from essential military personnel, and putting it towards a wall that we have no use for. If the Democrats did this for one of their pet projects, you'd hear the Republicans howling all across the country. And so it's another example of how Trump is running the government in the same chaotic state as his businesses, where he's a great PR guy, I'll give him that, but when it actually comes to the nitty-gritty and the finances and getting the job done, he simply is not up for the task. And we've seen this time and time again. We're seeing this now with the government budget and with the national debt, which just broke a new record. And in fact, we're going to have to borrow twice as much as we did last year, up to $1 trillion now. And it just shows that President Trump wants to run the government like a business, but he's not very good at that to begin with. So it's all coming together, and you're seeing it every day from Washington, unfortunately.
All right, Nate, a question for you. You are the grassroots director of Build the Wave. It focuses on volunteers and digital activists for campaigning rather than TV ads and big fundraisers. How important will technology and innovation be in the upcoming midterms? Nate?
It'll be absolutely critical. What we're seeing right now is a complete change of the political landscape, something that we've never seen, to the degree that we've never seen before. And we've seen glimpses of it already in Alabama, Virginia, Pennsylvania. All of this has been made possible because there's this complete new wave of energy really sweeping across the nation, both with voters and then also volunteers and small dollar donors who are getting involved at a level we've really never seen before, and it's incredibly exciting. But what's great too is we have so much new technology that can then harness that energy and use it more effectively. And a great example is text banking, for example. Our organization sent over 90,000 texts for Connor Lamb with 240 volunteers. That was mostly done remotely. We held a few text banks here in New York, but primarily it was done by organizing folks to get set up from their homes. And that was something that really wouldn't have been possible a couple of years ago. There's a lot of new technology coming out that's allowing folks to organize remotely and digitally and really use that energy that's out there. And I think it'll be absolutely critical to taking back the House and taking back the Senate in the upcoming midterm. So I'm very much looking forward to that wave.
Chris, what do you think of it, and should Republicans focus on it?
Well, they should, and I agree 100% with what Nate said up until the part about taking back the House and Senate, obviously. But I do think the aspect and the use of technology is absolutely essential. And I will surrender the point that Democrats have really led Republicans in that. You look at what Act Blue has accomplished from a fundraising standpoint. We don't have something like that really on the Republican side. We're trying to achieve it. But I'll give you one example on the Cruz for President campaign, where I was director, as you said, of analytics and digital strategy. We had an app that we had 97,000 people download. It gamified campaign activities. And it's kind of some of the things that Nate was talking about with the text messaging. But we had 52 million activities taken on behalf of Ted Cruz in the campaign for president. And what it allowed people to do is if they lived in Alaska, hypothetically, and they had a friend who lived in Iowa that might vote in the caucus, it connected them together. And I think the use of technology, whether it's on the Republican or the Democrat side, is an important development because it really brings us all together and it allows us to talk to each other on a one-on-one basis and takes us away from the large, sort of the campaign advertising back and forth and the negative ads, and allows us to actually speak to voters about issues that they care about and even connect them with their friends that they can visit with about issues. And so I really am optimistic about the use of technology to bring us all together and kind of change the face of politics.
Nice to end this on a bipartisan note. Thank you both very much.
You bet. Thank you, Larry.